Two guests this week on Tasting Room Radio. Welcome. I'm Terry David Mulligan. Two guests this week on the Mulligan Stew podcast. We'll be addressing the changes coming to the BC wine industry, specifically the Okanagan Valley, which got clobbered by two deep freezes over the last couple of winters, decimated the vineyards. We'll talk about the plans that they have made, being given permission to source their fruit this year from Washington, Oregon, California, Ontario, Vancouver Island, the Fraser Valley, in a very transparent manner on the bottle. They are good friends, actually. It helps to be able to make sense of what's going on in our wine business in British Columbia by talking to friends who know what they're talking about. We're going to start with Rhys Pender, Master of Wine, educator, wine judge, world-class wine judge, and a winemaker himself at Little Farm Winery in the Similkameen Valley. He had written a column about what changes were coming in terms of the BC wine business when the Washington, Oregon, California, and Ontario wines appear on our shelves, crafted by BC winemakers. This is a makeshift one-year proposal to help wineries get through, and because they've got such damage done during the two cold snaps, that they were given permission by the BC government to make wines with out-of-province grapes. And that's what's happened. And it's been very well done. The winemakers and the growers went directly to Washington and Oregon and California and Ontario and helped to grow those grapes, harvest them, crush them, and put them through cellars. And that's what we're going to see on our shelves. So that's the first thing. It's Rhys Pender, Master of Wine. The second part of the show is Kathy Malone, who's been one of the longest-serving winemakers in the Okanagan. And she has, of course, been with Hillside Estate Winery for many years. She's a mentor. I go to her to get answers to questions, and I put her on air, put her on microphone. And she's going to be talking about how she dealt with it, how the Naramata Bench is doing, and what's coming forward for all of us, we wine fans. Have a listen. It's very informative. I hope you like it. Next week, by the way, we're going to be talking to Zach Brown from Alderley in the Cowichan Valley, which did not have a freeze, but still had to deal with other elements. This is Tasting Room Radio. Welcome aboard. Welcome back. This is Tasting Room Radio. I'm Terry David Mulligan. We're doing, I don't even have a title for this yet. I guess the title is 2025, What Up? Because we've arrived at the wine growing year of 2025, and there's been so much baggage hauled along with it, and there are so high expectations for 2025 in the BC wine industry that we want to talk to the people who have clarity. I want to get it right here. Rhys Pender. I always go to Rhys when I want it right. Master of Wine, Little Farm Winery in downtown Coston. He has a Wine Plus Wine School, well-traveled wine judge. How are things in the Similkameen?
It's good. It's a mild winter so far. We're just getting out there, starting to tidy up the vines a little bit, get them ready to retrain for this upcoming year. So, like a lot of people have found that there wasn't nearly as much kind of vine death as was expected. Yeah. Some vineyards did lose their vines, of course, but a lot of people have found that it was, the vines were basically knocked back to the ground in some cases, but produced a lot of good shoots out of near the base of the plant that can be retrained as a new trunk and a new cane for the 2025 vintage. So we're optimistic that we'll be able to lay down a pretty solid crop for 2025.
It's a great last laugh for the plant because normally those suckers at the bottom are the first things that are pruned and gotten rid of, and all of a sudden they turn out to be the key.
Yeah, there's no pretty looking vineyards around this last couple of years. It's like keeping shoots here and there and everywhere and just letting it, the vine do what it wants to do. And then, that's why it's quite a big effort pruning for this year, because you've got to come through and sort of choose that best replacement trunk, or maybe a couple of them, as some people are starting to do, and then, clean up all the other stuff that was also growing around there. So it can look a bit messy, but, it'll be a lot of it will be back looking just like a normal vineyard in once this spring season gets underway.
You wrote a great post, BC Wine News, how BC wine country is preparing for a strong comeback. It was posted October the 9th, Wines of British Columbia. And you were talking about a roller coaster ride, which we can understand if you've ever been to the P&E. But one of the things at the bottom of that paragraph, it said, lots of great ideas are circulating how to make us even better BC wine in the coming years. That intrigued me.
Yeah, I think what it's kind of been a little bit of a boot in the backside for wine growers around the interior here, and so when I first started in the industry here, everyone hilled up their vines. It was standard practice. And then, you kind of milder winters come in, people just like figure, I don't really need to do that anymore. And, these practices kind of drop off that were standard back in the day, right? And now we're starting to see, these things come back where a lot of these things are more work, right? But at the end of the day, they make a vine better protected for the winter. And so if you can hill up over the graft, cover a bit of dirt around the base of the vinifera portion of the grafted vines, that will protect it from frosts, can grow back again if there is winter damage like we had last year. People are sometimes doing, going a step further, like burying canes, which is a technique used in, in parts of Ontario and some parts here in BC, where you train one of those suckers from the base and then bury it under the ground for the winter, just as a backup, right? And if it's a mild winter and everything's okay, you just cut that off and off you go and use what's above ground. But it's that kind of backup plan there. There's people I've seen, trialing things like hay over the base of the vine to protect from cold there as well. Geotextiles are being mentioned. Some of our colleagues up in the Kamloops, Thompson Valley area have been using those. They use them out in Quebec and in Prince Edward County and things as well. It's like a blanket for the vines, but all these things are pretty expensive to do, right? Both to set up and to maintain and extra labor, but it's worth it.
Which comes to wine sales, because really, at the end of the day, you need support. I had a conversation recently with Zach Brown at Alderley, the Gulf Islands, Vancouver Island, the Cowichan, Fraser Valley. They didn't have this cold snap. This is a prime chance, unfortunately, that they can really get their wines out there.
Yeah, it's great for, the coastal areas had a pretty normal vintage. I think it was also a bit of a challenging one, but not damage from like crop loss or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great chance for them to kind of get their wines out in the market and and be a little bit get a little bit more attention maybe for this last vintage.
And some of that Cowichan fruit ended up in the Okanagan as well.
I've heard of a couple of people who've purchased a little bit. Of course, there's not a lot of excess fruit out there from my understanding anyway, but I found a couple of people have picked up some island fruit and will be playing around with that. So usually the reverse is what's happening, right? Is you have the wineries at the coast buying fruit from interior, and now it's kind of flipped in this year, which is
and you made a really good point in this article that there is BC wine, because there was this flash went out saying, "Oh, there's no more wine. We have nothing left to sell. There's nothing. The shelves will be bare."
Yeah, I was a bit alarmed by that kind of perception and people saying, "Oh, no point going to the wineries. There's no wine." It's like that was even before we would have harvested the 24 crop that didn't happen in the interior. People were saying that, but we know, most wines take a year to make, at least some 2-3 before they're released to the market, and it's really only the wines that would have been the early production wines. Some of the Pinot Gris, maybe the fresher rosés, those kind of styles would have been bottled and at earliest released around now in January, but mostly not until the spring of 2025. So this 2024 crop that went missing wouldn't have even shown up yet, and then all the other wines that require more aging or go into barrel or anything, they wouldn't be out till 2026, 2027, and maybe even beyond. So we've still got, all these vintages, 23, 22, 21, 20, that were, plenty of good wine and good quantities of wine that are now just kind of coming into the market. So
Rhys Pender, Master of Wine, Little Farm Winery in the Similkameen, Wine Plus Wine School, very traveled wine judge, good friend, good fisherman. There's something that you mentioned in your article about the replacement wines that are coming from Washington, Oregon, and Ontario. The wines will be clearly labeled as to where they are from and will not be blended with or labeled as using BC wine. How do you feel about that? Not blending the wines. Like if it's Washington, it's all Washington.
I think it's good because, the whole point of this being able to bring in these replacement grapes or wines from other places is really about survival. It's about keeping the lights on, keeping people employed. When you lose an entire vintage crop, and remember too that some people lost a lot of their crop in 2023 as
Sure.
well and had a really small crop, right? So 2 years in a row. But yeah, you've still got all that other wine, so you still need to have your winery open and selling wine and paying staff, and your vineyard, even though there's no grapes, you still have to manage it and spray and do all the work, right? So it's just doing all that work for with nothing at the end of it. So these replacement wines are just about survival, right? They giving people the option to bring something in, make some wine, have some wine for sale that can help pay the winemakers, the viticulturists, the tasting room staff, the salespeople, and stay in business essentially.
Rhys, when will we start seeing these wines?
Probably, I think, there might even be some kind of on the market already or getting close to, but most of the, depending on the type of wine, we'll probably start seeing them this spring,
Yeah,
I would
May
say.
1st. Yeah, in around May.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what did you do at Little Farm?
Yeah, so our business model at Little Farm is kind of lucky for this sort of situation. Is we typically don't release particularly our Riesling and Chardonnay, our two main wines, for about 3 or 4 years. So they usually spend a year in old oak and then settled and then bottled and then usually not released for a couple of years because they need that time to kind of open up and flesh out. So I figure we've got a couple of vintages worth of wine, so we'll have to just kind of eke that out over that extra year, and but figure we should be okay without bringing in something. There are some complications with sales and marketing, and getting what consumers will think about wines from other places, and if they will care at all, we don't know.
Rhys, what new varietals are we going to see coming out of the Okanagan in the rethink part?
Yeah, I think there's been sort of two ways that it's essentially happened. Some people have tried to replace what they lost and don't have. So
Sure.
if they needed rosé, they're
Sure.
making rosé. If they needed some, crisp, fresh Pinot Gris, they've gone for that. And on the flip side of that, the others, I've talked to a number of people who are kind of going the opposite. They're like, let's just play around and make something we've never made before. It also then won't kind of muddle with their existing portfolio and the familiarity of those. It's just going to be, like a random Grenache will come in and be made and then, disappear again the next year, right? And so I think that's a fun way to do it. It won't confuse people with the regular portfolio either. But yeah, I don't know. I'd love to. I'm really curious to see what does
No
come up
kidding.
because I think I've seen bits and pieces of everything, to be honest. And yeah, it's going to
It's
be
going to be
interesting.
no, it's going to be wild. It's going to be just wild. As
Yeah.
soon as that starting line shows up, and as you say, it might be starting now. Now the last thing here, you started about a rethink. What?
Yeah, so the wine industry is famous, right? Once you make a decision, stick some vines in the dirt, it's a very expensive thing to try and change after that, right? So we probably all know that if you replant a vine, it takes 3 years for it to produce a decent crop,
Yeah,
and then a couple of years to see how well that crop does, and time's disappearing. So the one silver lining of getting kind of wiped out is you have to start from scratch, and so you get a chance to really go, would I do the same thing as I did
sure.
10, 15, 20 years ago? Or, will I hone that in? Will I be going for grapes that are better suited to the site for quality? Will I be going for grapes that are better suited to the site for, for hardiness and or hopefully maybe all of those things and what the market's looking for? So it's a little chance for retweaking and restarting in a way that you got forced to do it, so you might as well come back better and stronger than you were before.
Two things I'll let you go. One is the Similkameen. On a scale of 1 to 10, how did it do collectively?
Collectively, not so well, I would say. There were a lot of vines lost in some areas in the Similkameen, but
However,
also
the
a
border
number
is
that kind of came back.
the border's right there. Literally, the border's right there. Your wine friends are just on the other side of that road.
I know it's not far to zip down and get get some wine, but yeah, no, a lot of vineyards were really badly
Okay.
damaged and will be pulled out and replanted. But a lot like mine, I think I only lost 60 vines or something like that out of 5,500 actually killed. But a lot of them knocked back to a new trunk. Some produced plenty of greenery on the up at the canopy level as well, and they'll be kind of pruned almost as normal. So it's a real mixed bag, and I've seen other vineyards that have similar to that as well. So really, like everywhere, it's all over the map in every area.
I said two things, but it's three. Of course, both of us are asking people to rethink themselves and buy local. That's how you help people. Buy a BC bottle of wine.
Yeah, I think there's still lots of 100% BC wine available if you want that. If your favorite winery did lose a lot of crop and has gone for the replacement wines, by all means, taste those too and see what kind of fun stuff they've come up with. But it's a really, really good time, I think, to really keep the dollars here in the local wine business. And yeah, and then they can get back on track, get the 2025 vintage underway, and in a couple of years we'll forget this all happened.
No, never.
We hope.
I can't remember anybody saying that they let someone else make their wines in Washington. They all went down there. All the wine growers went. All of the winemakers went down and did their own farming, did their own harvest and blending.
Yeah, I think a lot of them, learnt a lot about what's going on down there. Went down, visited vineyards. There's so many interesting different AVAs in Washington. Lots of kind of old volcanic soils, and there's some great sites and some great wines. We unfortunately don't see much of it in BC because of the markup structure we have here. They end up being so expensive, and so anyone who's gone across the border and bought these wines, and then they come back
Sure.
to BC and it's like 4 or 5 times the price. It's hard to stomach that, and so yeah, so we don't buy too many of them locally and just drink them over there. But there's some great wines, and yeah, I know a lot of winemakers were down there 2, 3, 4 times visiting sites, setting up tastings and everything to find the styles of wine that they really were looking for.
Were you asked to be part of the group that talked to Alberta about patching up our differences and getting and if not, what are your thoughts on being able to sell directly to Alberta fans?
I mean, yeah, I wasn't part of the any of that, but I mean, we've been fighting in Canada for a long time to just be able to send to anyone in wine to anyone in Canada, and that should be, it should be a given. It's not, unfortunately. There's been a couple of states, provinces that have opened up in
Yeah,
the over the few years, and I allowed that, so that's a start. I guess this is another start, right? It's going to add some paperwork and complexities for winery accountants, but it's above board now, and if you just follow the ways, I think it's a good step in the right direction. Of course, we'd rather have it just completely open, Canada wide, but that's we've got to chip away at it slowly, I guess.
it's also good news in a sea of bad. It's
It's
good
good news
news.
in a sea of bad for sure. Yeah, I mean, because that was another big hit on wineries. You're struggling. You've just lost your crop, and then you're told you can't ship any
Yeah,
wine. So,
yeah.
Terry, you won't be able to do your stunts anymore. Standing on the border there with your illegal wine, though. Yeah,
I'll go in a heartbeat. I still have the case.
yeah.
What's your website?
Littlefarmwinery.ca and wineplus.ca.
Thank you for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you for your wines.
Well, it's a pleasure. Always fun to chat. Yeah.
Rhys, Pender, friends. All right, we're heading to the Naramata Bench and Hillside Estate Winery. Kathy Malone's going to have at it. This is Tasting Room Radio. I have found, as promised at the top of the show, Kathy Malone, the winemaker at Hillside Estate Winery on the Naramata Bench. I've been talking to Rhys Pender. This is a different year, as you well know, because of the two deep freezes back to back and the damaged vineyards, damaged wineries, frankly. We heard some pretty dark stories about the demise of the Okanagan Valley. But it's turning out that there is a second life for some of those vines, and people are finding their fruit in other places, Washington, Oregon, some in California, Ontario as well. How did you handle all that?
So the Naramata Bench fared pretty well. We largely had no vine death. My worst block is showing a 25% loss of vines, but I think that's cumulative over, a couple of years. And the next block is 4% loss of vines.
Sure.
So, we're expecting a full recovery by within the next couple of years for sure. We'll have to see what next year holds. We had such a good growing year that I expect the vines had ideal conditions and didn't have to grow fruit. So really their only job was to recover. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to see very solid recovery. I had a couple of blocks that had a little bit of fruit. We got enough Pinot Gris from the Dickinson Vineyard, which is a less than an acre block. We got enough to make 1 barrel's worth of Pinot Gris. So yeah, we'll do our first ever single vineyard white wine. It'll be the Dickinson Vineyard Pinot Gris.
So what about those Pinot Gris fans coming to your winery? Have you got other secondary plans for them?
So we make 2 styles of Pinot Gris. We make our unoaked Pinot Gris, which is our, I don't know what you'd call it, cheap and cheerful or patio pounder, all those things, which is super popular throughout the province. And that we have stocked out. I think that we're probably on our last pallet right now. But we also make a heritage Pinot Gris, which is a barrel fermented Pinot Gris. We are currently selling the 2022 heritage Pinot Gris. We haven't released the 23 heritage yet. So we expect to have that to offer through the season.
And what about the unoaked?
So we have brought in some juice from Washington. So it's a blend of Columbia and Yakima Valley fruit that we've made wine as close in style to our own Pinot Gris as we could manage. And it will be released to, our key accounts. We'll allocate it to, we haven't finalized the label design. Our intention is to release it as unoaked Pinot Gris, as Hillside unoaked Pinot Gris, but on our front label currently, it has the appellation. So it says Naramata Bench, Okanagan Valley.
Okay. And
so depending on what's legal, what we think is legal, that wording will be replaced with, it will say Washington grown or grown in Washington or whatever we're allowed to put on there.
Yeah.
And full story on the back label. So,
how did your Muscat Ottonelle vineyard work? Did it survive?
It survived. We got a bit of Muscat grapes from another vineyard, a previous contract of ours. They just had enough for, half a barrel. So we brought it in and fermented it, and I've fortified it for our white port style wine.
She is Kathy Malone, winemaker at Hillside Estate, and a great friend and very knowledgeable. Your thoughts, please, on love interest signed between Alberta and British Columbia and being able to sell to your wine fans next door. You have a lot of them. How are you feeling about all of that?
So we haven't been registered with the AGLC for years.
Yeah.
It might even be 10 years. So we haven't been selling through retail outlets at the AGLC. We've only been selling direct from the winery.
Yep.
So, it's not a win really for us, because now we have to charge our customers a $3 tax on every bottle, right? And I think it's important that our customers understand that it is a tax, right? That it's not an admin fee, that it's something that is being collected by us and remitted to the Alberta government to help support their social programs.
Sure.
Okay. Albertans are quite proud of the fact that they don't have a sales tax, but they have a sales tax on BC alcohol.
Yeah, that's right. Do they still come to your front door? The great thing is following the wines back to Hillside and visiting. Do they still come?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. When we have club pickup parties, a lot of Albertans come. And, it's not to save shipping. It's free shipping for club members.
Sure.
So it's not that.
How does one join the wine club, please?
Oh, if you go to our website at hillsidewinery.ca, you almost can't not join it. It's very easy.
And here's the last question, and speak in general about the Naramata Bench, because you always do. How is it going to survive? All of your neighbors, you and your neighbors, will they survive this downturn, and will they come out the other? And will we recognize them for their varietals and their vineyards?
I think so. I think maybe even more so, because I think that this event has raised awareness, especially for wineries of, small to medium sized wineries, which is what the Naramata Bench basically is, right? And the tiny wineries that we expected to see go under immediately they're resilient. They're powering through. So
give me your website once again, please.
hillsidewinery.ca.
Okay. Thank you for your generosity, your time, your patience, and your friendship. Appreciate it.
Well, same to you.
Kathy Malone, winemaker, Hillside Estate on the Naramata Bench. This is Tasting Room Radio.